Welcome to the Over the Hump Podcast, your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cottrell, Rachel Cottrell, and Keaton Dodd.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Over the Hump Brahman podcast. We're here with another great episode today. I am Rachel Cottrell, one of your hosts of the podcast. And today I am very excited to have with us not just one of my best friends, but one of the world's foremost authorities in Brahman cattle, and that is Chris Shivers of Infinity Cattle Services. Chris, you want to say hi?
Sure, Rachel. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come on. I think this is a great opportunity for us to discuss the Brahman breed and a lot of other things that pertain to everyday life. But again, it's an extreme honor to even have this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I was trying to think back to when we actually first met, and I believe it was probably in the early 1990s. And I believe we both had glasses that were pretty thick at that time.
Yeah.
But I think that we met at the All-American maybe in like 93 or 94. Does that sound right to you?
You know, you're exactly right. And I'm pretty sure that it was probably at the backdrop at the banquet when I was the overall champion of the herdsman's quiz and you were reserve. But
that is not true. That is not true.
I think you were the champion and I was second. But none.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I know that's how we met, really. It was like really our mutual love of Brahman facts.
Right.
And then from there, tell us a little bit about, how I know you were in the AJBA because we showed together, but like walk us through kind of your pathway from getting involved, because I think that's something that maybe a lot of people may not know is that we're a junior Brahmin showman, and just walk us through kind of the path that got you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, Rachel, a lot like probably a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast, I grew up in 4-H and FFA. At 11 years old, I decided I wanted to show a Brahman heifer, and we bought the first one and had some success with that one. And it grew from there to not only showing cattle, but of course, starting a small herd throughout the high school years, of course, involved in both 4-H and FFA. Not only did we show, I was involved in the livestock judging contest, took advantage of some of the leadership opportunities. Another organization I was involved in there in Mississippi, which a lot of people may not even know that I grew up in Mississippi. So Brandon Cottrell and I share that common bond. But I was at Mississippi Junior Cattlemen Association. The reason I make mention of that is that too provided an opportunity for me to meet a lot of industry people, both in the state of Mississippi as well as abroad. And, just being involved in those three organizations throughout the high school years. And of course, as a result of being on a competitive livestock judging team where we won the state contest in 1995 for FFA, I did receive a scholarship to go to junior college and ultimately Mississippi State. The thing that I would want to kind of emphasize, and especially for some of the younger agriculture students out there who might be listening, was through my involvement in 4-H FFA and Mississippi Junior Cattlemen Association, I was awarded 3 different internships, one with the Cooperative Extension Service, one with the Mississippi Beef Council, and one with the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service. And the reason I make mention of those is at the conclusion of my college career, each one of those entities offered a job, in addition to others, of which one was the American Brahman Breeders Association. In the fall of 1999, when I graduated Mississippi State University, I did take a job as Director of Association Services and Youth with the American Brahman Breeders Association. served in that capacity for 4 years. And, one of the programs that I was able to oversee was the American Junior Brahmin Association, as you made mention earlier. That was a program that I was a part of. In addition to that, oversaw the F1 program, the research and breed improvement programs, and basically any program, whether it be show or educational programs through ABBA, I oversaw and did that for 4 years. And in May of 2004, there was a change in the leadership at ABBA. The current executive vice president had left to go on to other ventures, and I was offered that position. And I stayed to the executive vice president for 13 years. In April of 2017, I did leave and went out on my own to form Infinity Cattle Services, which I'm still managing today. So that's just kind of a brief background and just a little history of kind of where I came from.
Yeah, so it's funny because I definitely remember when you were the youth director, but up until you said that, I had kind of forgot because I always think of you just as the CEO,
Right.
and I forgot that you actually started at the youth program, which was a great time. My last All-American would have been 97 in Beaumont. Where do you remember where the 99 All-American was? Your first one that you put on?
So actually, the first one I did would have been in 2000.
Okay.
The 99 All-American was in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, okay.
The one that I did in 2000 was in Glen Rose, Texas.
Okay. Was it air conditioned?
Yes, it was actually. Yeah. In fact, back then it was a requirement that the facility had to be air conditioned. I want to say the first time that possibly it wasn't. My Actually, oddly enough, I think might have been 2009 when you and I did the All American in Bryan at the Brazos County Expo Center.
Yes, I think you're right. I do think that. I remember but at that point, there just wasn't facilities that could hold the All-American because it had gotten so big.
Yep.
That would be some of the best times of my life, honestly, when you and I were putting on those All-American shows. It was the best, we had so much fun doing that.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. We've done a lot of really good things together that we're all good and very successful.
So 13 years as the CEO of the ABBA, which is honestly a tremendous accomplishment because I mean, in most breed associations, the tenure of a CEO can sometimes be short-lived. That's got to be one of the longer running CEOs of a breed association.
Yeah, and one thing that I did fail to mention back when we were talking about kind of how I got to where I am now is a lot of that's just been at the right place at the right time with good people helping me along.
Mhm.
And I think that I would have to say the same thing about one, becoming the executive vice president, and two, the length of my time there was I had the opportunity to work with a lot of good people,
Yeah.
and it was a mixed bag of established breeders. When I first started, man, a lot of the stalwarts and the names that come back from really being influencers were still involved.
Mhm.
And that really helped me a lot as a young guy. And, I was the youngest CEO in the country.
Well, I
Uh,
was just going to mention that you had to be the youngest, for sure, the one of the youngest in ABBA, if not the youngest, and then if not within the whole USA amongst your peer group.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. And had I not had the support of not only people at ABBA, but even other breed reps, I probably wouldn't have made it, to be honest with you, because there was a lot of questions that I had, a lot of things that were coming down the pipe that guys I could reach out to and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, yeah, we feel pretty good about that, or no, we don't think that's the direction that our organization or your organization or the industry needs to go. And then ultimately I would recommend or not recommend things to the ABBA board. But no, I had a great run at ABBA. Certainly it helped propel me to where I am today, and made a lot of memories and a lot of good friends. And it's not a day goes by that I don't regret it. But had a great time.
Yeah, I remember there was I served on the board of ABBA 16 years, and 3 of those I was on the executive board with you as the CEO. And to me, that time frame was some of the best times that ABBA has really experienced, at least in my lifetime. There was like F1 field days everywhere and great events, and camaraderie was really high. And I personally attribute that to you as a leader because I know when I sat on the board, there would be questions and maybe you didn't, we as directors, wanted some guidance. You always had the facts and you always laid it out for the board of like, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's the direction I recommend, and it just set the tone for ABBA. And it was great. You were a great CEO.
Well,
Amazing.
I appreciate that. And, it's
Yeah.
working with good people like you that, were one, willing to work with me. Secondly, is, progressive and like, saw the vision of where the organization needed to go. And as a result, and when I took the thing over in 2004, it was at rock bottom. I mean, we were at 7,000 registrations. We were not even making budget every year. And by the time I left in 2017, I think we were at 12,500 registrations. Of course, we had brought a lot of useful tools and information, educational programs to the membership. And then I think we had amassed close to $700,000 in reserve. So,
Yeah.
I had a great run, and it was a good time, but it was only because of good people like you and a lot of the people who might even be listening to this, that we worked together as a team and we got to where we needed to be. And the end result was great success.
Yeah. So then after you closed the chapter with ABBA, you started Infinity. Walk us through kind of your thought process on that and what pushed you to go that direction. Because really, I mean, at that time, you could have done anything. You could have taken any job in the USA, and you chose to go out on your own and do Infinity. And talk us through that.
So, like you said earlier, serving 13 years as the executive vice president for Breed Association was almost unheard of. But when I took that position, several mentors of mine said, 10 years is kind of the maximum that you need to stay in a position like that.
Hmm.
One, you're going to get stale.
Hmm.
And secondly, is the organization probably needs some new ideas. And I think that's exactly right. The
Hmm.
reason I stayed those additional 3 years is there were some things that I wanted to wrap up from a timing standpoint of, where we were with the registry program, where we were on an office lease, where we were in terms of some leadership changes, all kind of led me to stay the additional 3 years. And I knew that it was time to go. They didn't necessarily know that I was leaving, but at the same time, I think once I left, you saw some significant changes that were probably better in terms of where they were as an association at that time. Uh, I saw a need, having sitting there and answering a lot of the calls at ABBA, of people who were getting in the business, that had the financial resources, they had the want to, but they just didn't have the guidance to know how to get started, or more importantly, how to remain successful. And so the initial idea was to get out and help these people. I saw a need and I felt like I could fill that need.
Hmm.
I'm probably better known today as a sales manager in marketing cattle, but that wasn't even really the whole concept when I left ABBA. It was more to go out and more of a consulting role and helping people.
Hmm.
And in fact, the first 18 months that I was out on my own, I didn't even have a sale. I assisted with some sales, and I hosted my first sale actually in November of 2018. But that was kind of the foundation, is seeing a need and going and filling that need. And as a result, I think we've helped some 60 different breeders over the last 5, 6 years, held close to 126 different sales. Uh, and it continues to grow. I mean, we get calls every day about, hey, we need some assistance, and those questions or needs are anywhere from how do we mate our cattle to record keeping to marketing to the whole facet, that a lot of people want to be in the Brahmin game. They just don't know what to do, and we've been able to fill that role.
Well, and your clients have been extremely successful. And I mean, we were talking about this on another podcast that if you can build a business where the objective of the business is to help others be successful, then ultimately you're going to be successful, and that's exactly what you've done. Well, let's move into talking about sales data because as you know, I track the sales data on every Brahmin sale in the USA, and I added some in Mexico this year. And you and I talk about this a lot, like sales trends, sales numbers, and things like that. And I think a lot of times out in the industry, you kind of hear like, "Oh, well, prices are up," or "prices are tough right now." But for me, I like having those actual numbers. So that's why I track all these sales. This year alone, I have data on 350 head of gray Brahmin, females that have sold, which is a lot, and many of those have been through your sales. As of today, the average price of a gray Brahman heifer selling in a sale, an online sale or an auction, is $7,300, which I think is great. This spring, it was right at 7,000 even, and then last fall, that average was 5,400. So we've seen nearly a $2,000 head per head increase in our Brahman heifer prices over the last 12 months. So, what do you think is the factors going into that?
Well,
It's good
it,
news, first of all, wouldn't you agree?
well, it is good news, and to be quite honest with you, and I'm glad you share that information with the listeners because, in my experience, it's really not probably been overall that good. Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
it seems like over the last couple of months and having several sales that we're knocking around that $3,800 to $4,000 average, which is still good. I mean that's not
Mhm.
bad, but I would think that probably we've got some the more elite sales maybe in some of those figures that you gave as well.
Yeah, this is any sale, any Brahmin sale. I'm gonna pull up my spreadsheet while we're talking, but any Brahmin sale, whether it's like an online sale, and I will say, like the data in this sale, I'm just pulling up one right here, and it's like $1,300 or $1,800 a head. So there definitely is a range, but then there are some wildly high numbers as well too.
Sure, sure. So of course, we go in cycles, and having been around this for quite a while, just like you have, uh, I feel like that we're somewhat of the bottom of the cycle right now, which it doesn't discourage me at all. That just means that things are fixing to get better, and I certainly think that's right.
Mhm.
There's so many factors that affect this. One would be the weather. Right now you're in the middle of what we went through, or a lot of regions went through one of the worst droughts they've had since maybe 2011.
Mhm.
We think that hay's somewhat short.
Mhm.
Uh, there was a massive sell off, not necessarily for Brahman cattle, but a lot of cattle have been sold off over the past 2 summers.
Mhm.
So I would think that if a sale was to be had right now, that people would be a little hesitant, even on buying Brahman cattle, just on where they're going to put them and what they're going to feed them. And
Mhm.
once we get into the spring of the year, certainly we feel like that if it's a wet winter and people have grass and they're optimistic, that we think that we might see unprecedented prices come the spring of the year. And that could be on both the commercial cattle and the Brahman cattle. The unique thing about Brahman cattle is they're somewhat directly tied to the commercial cattle industry in terms of when people are selling expensive or high dollar calves, for the most part, especially in the southern United States, they're using Brahman or Brahman influenced cows.
Mhm.
And many of those could be F1s, and many of those F1 producers are using Brahman females to
Mhm.
create the F1. So it is somewhat of a trickle down effect that's directly tied to the commercial cattle market.
Mhm.
Now, there's two sectors, and of course, we'll probably discuss this in a little bit of the really elite Brahman cattle that bring the 30, 40, $50,000. And then, of course, there's a lot of folks out there who are tickled to death that are able to sell large numbers of heifers in the range of $3,000 to $4,000. And certainly those are kind of the folks that we really need to kind of take care of, because those are the ones that'll go out and they'll buy one of those high dollar donors
Mhm.
or better kind of replacement females or even a better bull to produce females that ultimately can be sold to other seed stock producers, whether they be, to be bred to a Brahman bull or even a Hereford bull. So I think all that to say is that we're in a cycle. I think that things are going to get better. But yet, right now we're seeing the really, really good cattle bring as much money as they've ever brought.
Mhm.
Um, and it's somewhat of a concern and I'm talking to you and a lot of other people who are producing large numbers of heifers, which I think you're pretty well sold out, but a lot of other people necessarily aren't. And they say, well, it seems that the people who are showing up today, they want to buy a really good donor or a really good female, and they're willing to pay that high dollar. But we still have 150 other heifers that we need to sell that ordinarily we would sell, but instead of those people buying a large number of heifers, well, then they're going and they're really wanting to focus heavily on buying the upper end, which is it's concerning. But hopefully, when we see this thing turn around in an improved market, that a lot of those females are more fluid and are able to get moved.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right, and it's something we do talk about a lot. I think that comes down to who is your target market of who you're selling for, and really, in the USA Brahman market right now, I would say sadly, we kind of have two facets going. We have a show crowd and we have like a production crowd, and they don't really cross over, you know? So the market for a show prospect is really strong right now. But some of the, you know, the guy who's looking for 50 replacement heifers at one time, you know, those type customers now are few and far between, you know. Um, so what would you have any advice on how you think our breed could fix that?
Rachel, I really think we're probably a little out of whack on that, and that's where I get probably more concerned than anything.
Mhm.
Is and you know, fortunately, we get to sell as many of the high dollar ones as anybody. You know, when you look at some of the special sales that we do,
Mhm.
and really, you probably kind of catered to that market just because it's hot and it's easy.
Mhm.
You know, if the cattle look good, if they have a good pedigree, then they're pretty marketable.
Mhm.
But the issue is that the people who are going to buy those cattle, we have to help them market their cattle that are going to kind of be one tier below what they're buying.
Mhm.
And really, I think the saving grace of that's going to be that hopefully the whole commercial market turns around. Hopefully, there's a increase in the number of females that need to be purchased. In
Mhm.
our case, hopefully for F1 production, and that the market's able to absorb some of those cattle. If not, I think we're in big trouble because we've got a lot of females that are being born every year, and unfortunately, right now, not many homes for them.
Yeah, well, and we haven't even touched on the Brahmin bull market. That's a whole nother, maybe a whole nother podcast.
Right.
But similar, you know, in a similar vein, I think we have to work on as a whole our breed focusing too on functional cattle that still serve the grassroots commercial cattlemen. And we can't forget that really the ultimate mission of Brahman was for crossbreeding. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love shows more than anybody else, but we can't lose sight of why Brahman does exist as a beef breed in the USA, and that is for crossbreeding.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Exactly. And, you know, and again, you know, BRC does a phenomenal job on trying to combine the two. And ultimately, I think that's where we've got to be.
Mhm.
And the people that I work with, I tell them, hey, guys, listen, here's the thing. We've got to be marketable for everybody.
Mhm.
One, the cattle have to look right, which would kind of be more the show ring appeal that you discussed.
Mhm.
Two, they have to come from marketable genetics. I mean, you know, we've got to have something. When they look at a pedigree, they say, I know this bull and I know where this cow came from, or, you know, it's got to be of something that people recognize. And then the third thing that I think kind of ties us all together is they have to have some performance data.
Mhm.
Um, and that didn't mean that, you know, that they have to be performance driven. But I think what it does, it provides the marketability of these cattle to now you're catering to three different groups of people.
Mhm.
Some people say we're performance breeders and we're here to buy cattle that are, you know, low birth weight, high grow, good milk, good carcass, whatever it is. Okay, perfect. We've got that. Okay, then that brings them in.
Mhm.
Or no, we're here to buy a show heifer. Well, they care nothing about the performance, but they sure care how it looks. Okay, boom. Now we can hit that market. And then some people, they don't know how to understand performance data and they don't know what they're looking like phenotypically. But what they do know
Mhm.
is that daughters out of Captain or daughters out of this bull or that or whatever, well, that's popular and that's where we need to be.
Mhm.
So if we hit all three facets, then when the guy shows up, we've got something that he can tie on to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, be thinking of the answer to this question is what is your biggest pet peeve in the Brahmin business right now? But while you're thinking, I'm going to share one of mine, and that is when people who use the term performance and show. And I think if you ask someone like, what is the definition of a performance animal? Well, you just gave it, you know, low birth weight, high growth, functional, fertile, all of that. But I think there is somewhat of a stereotype in our breed of people think that performance means not good enough to show or, you know, a lower tier animal. And that's not the case at all. And that's what we kind of try to put the message out, you know, our show cattle are performance based cattle first, and that's really how it should be. Like, so performance doesn't mean not show. It means, you know, there to do the job of what a beef animal is supposed to do. I think we got to kind of work on that mentality in our breed a little bit, that there's not a distinction of, show is at one tier and performance is at a different tier. They should be working together.
Correct.
Pet peeve? You want to share? Do you have a biggest pet peeve?
Well, I think you kind of touched on a few of those things, and I don't want to say it's a pet peeve, but I think it's a problem, and it's the lack of education.
Mhm.
Um, just like you can flip through Facebook or you know marketplaces or whatever you want to call it, where people are advertising cattle, and I really question myself, like, one, why are they posting these cattle for sale, and two, who in the world would buy
Yeah.
them? And I say that and not in a negative way. I just think that people don't truly know.
Mhm.
It's I don't get that. And then I think another concern that I have, which we've already discussed a little bit, is probably the lack of performance data that's being collected, and maybe even the quality overall in some of the cattle.
Mhm.
We get a lot of calls for people who are wanting to buy, bulls and females both. And it's getting to be, which I'm happy for, that, hey, we want some actual ultrasound scan data. Okay. Well, unfortunately, there's fewer and fewer people who have that.
Mhm.
Or we're looking for a herd bull, and you go out and you're looking at different places for something specific, and you're not finding the quality of cattle that you really need, or the kind of cattle that combined both the you know data
Mhm.
with the phenotypic quality. So I think it's something that is breeders and those who are in the breed or really need to work on collecting the information so that we have more useful tools to provide to our customers, but yet not losing sight of structural soundness, quality, and all the things that the breed was based on.
Mhm. Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Well, you said it. It's the quality of the cattle, and but how many time? I mean, let's be honest. There are some cattle out there on Facebook, but even being exhibited in Brahmin shows that maybe have some issues that wouldn't put them at the top tier of the breed. But yet here they are still showing and out there in the marketplace. And there's a there's one school of thought of people who say things like, hey, we need like a sift in our shows. We need like a prejudging, like how they have in international countries, where we go in a couple of days before and we sift out any cattle with, feet problems, mouth problems, breed character problems, sheath problems, all of that, so that only the cattle that get to the show ring are ones that do meet, the highest level. But then there's the other side of that of people saying, well, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings and we don't want to point out to someone that, maybe their cattle have a flaw. Um, and so we just want to let everybody compete. What's your take on that? How do you do that? Do things in a positive way without still making progress in the breed, but without hurting anyone's feelings?
Yeah. So I guess a lot of what you're asking would be more specifically to the show ring, and
Yeah.
you know, I think either way would be fine. And I guess I look at it from the exhibitor standpoint of, if I'm not going to be competitive in the class and I go through a sift and they go ahead and send me to the beds, the outcome was going to be the same.
Hmm.
And it probably, from a logistical standpoint, would probably even expedite the show a little more, just because the judge doesn't have to look as many cattle, even though he's going to find the top end. It's just fewer animals to walk in front of him. So I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that. I think the outcome's ultimately going to be the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's fine. And to follow up on that, I just think that again, you just have a lot of people who don't know. I mean, they're bringing a handful of cattle there to the show that are truly the best ones that they raised, but in the grand scheme of things, they just don't really, uh, stack up to being as competitive as maybe the mid tier of a lot of other people.
Yeah. I had a conversation with somebody at the national show, and they were a new breeder and they were kind of disappointed in the way that their cattle had placed. And they said to me that they were like, well, these cattle always place at the top, when we're showing at these smaller jackpot shows. And I was like, well, that's great. If you have these shows that you can compete at regionally and you can do well at them, but also when you do get to the bigger shows, like the water is deep and everybody brings their best of the best. And I mean, we have cattle we had the national champion bull and heifer, but we also had some cattle that, didn't place as high. And so I do think some of that is just part of showing and, different judges and things like that. But, it's good, I think, for people to have success at smaller shows. But when you do get to Houston or the Nationals, you've got to realize like, hey, this is deep water here. This is the best we have.
Yep,
So,
no, most definitely.
so
And it's unfortunate those people maybe don't place as high as they want to, but I think too it provides them an opportunity to see other genetics, and use it as an educational. Hey, we're here. We see the best. We see how we have to improve. And really, I mean, that's the whole impetus behind showing is to take what you think is your best and compete against everybody else's best and find out who's got the best.
yeah,
So,
that's right. Well, in this particular person, they had some show cattle that they had purchased from other breeders that actually had placed pretty low, and then they had a calf that was one of their younger calf that they had raised themselves that placed pretty high. And I was like, "Well, dude, you've accomplished your goal. You've taken genetics and you've bred them, and now your best placing animal is one that you raise that carries your brand. So I would consider that a success." You know.
right.
Brahman breeders know, you want the finest herd? You have to start with the finest Brahman bull semen, and there's no finer selection than at BRC Ranch. Our champion makers are exactly that, but we know variety is essential. We also offer semen from low birth weight bulls, polled/scurred bulls, and sexed heifer semen. BRC Ranch works to release orders within 3 to 5 business days, but you can always stop by the ranch to pick up your order too. Bring the top Brahman sires to your ranch. Go online to shopbrcatrere.com.
So, quick question. We've had a lot of discussion about showing and everything like that. What do you rank first, pedigree or conformation?
Well, me personally, it'd be confirmation. But as indicated earlier, I think a lot of people don't really know how to see confirmation, so it's easier to go to the pedigree.
Hmm.
So, if anybody's listening, I would say that you need a balance of both to try to hit two different markets of people who understand the phenotype and what they're supposed to look like, but then also to the group who breeds solely on pedigree.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easy to market based off pedigree. And like when I'm writing footnotes for our sale, literally the first thing I usually write about is the pedigree. And someone once told me you don't need to write footnotes about a pedigree because the entire pedigree is there for them to see. But, I mean, you do. You look at these footnotes and everything is about the pedigree, which, like you said, anybody can kind of research that. I do think that it's important if you are going to market off pedigree, you've got to have a notable animal like in the first generation. Like you see people saying like, "Oh, this is a great grandson of Noble." Well, I mean, there's a lot of great grandsons of Noble out there, so it's got to be in the first generation. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, no, that's the whole key, and I think it needs to ideally be on the sire and the dam. But of course, it's easier to go buy some semen on a well-known bull and breed it to maybe a cow that might not have as fancy of a pedigree and still achieve where you need to be. But yeah, no, you've got to keep some relevance in the front part of that pedigree for sure.
So if you could, as a breeder, put on your breeder hat, if you could be known for being a breeder of a great legendary bull or a great legendary cow of the breed, which one would you pick?
Well, I think probably most people are going to say the bull, just because probably he'll have more impact on the breed than maybe a cow. Would you agree, or are you
Yes.
more
We have
female?
me, Brandon, and Keaton had this conversation not too long ago, and they both said they would prefer to have a famous cow, but I voted for the famous bull. And I mean, and I think I've got that with like Noble, Dutton, Boombox, you know. But I know just as a kid, for me, well, we grew up in the same era. As a kid, I remember going to Houston and looking like down the JD Hudgens aisle at all of the big 3-year-old bulls that they had, showing up at that time. And it was just so impressive. And for me as a kid, that was kind of the goal. I was like, one day I want to have this. Um, and so for me, yes, it's the bull.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just think it probably brings more prestige, where everybody in the world's going to remember, oh, yeah, that's old bull such and such, as compared to a cow that, after a period of time, she's going to be gone.
Yeah. So we hear a lot of talk in the industry, that the average lifespan of a seed stock breeder is 7 or 8 years. You've heard that, right? By
Right.
the time you get in and get out and stuff like that. Um, and I know both you and I probably share the goal that we would like to change that. We would like to see that be much longer if people, want to stay in the Brahmin business. But currently, right now, what do you see as the driving factors of why people are choosing to get into Brahmin? New breeders.
You know, I think there's a number of reasons, but it seems to me that people who are getting in the Brahmin breed today are doing it because of their uniqueness. They're doing it because of uh, kind of the social aspect of it. I think it's fun. They have a friend who's in it, or they like the cattle because of their uniqueness. And I think that's fine. But I really wish that people were getting in because of the utility of the cattle, to say, well, I'm getting into Brahmin because all the positive attributes that we market the breed on.
Hmm.
And I'm not by any means saying that, we're a niche breed or a novelty breed by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that probably the big driver today is you're having people who are coming in because it's unique and it's fun.
Hmm. Well, and I think that I agree. And I mean, I don't want to say we are not a novelty breed. We are not a niche breed by any means when you look at the function of Brahman cattle. But here in the USA, I would agree it could be going down that path to some, degree. Um, but I don't think, just as a whole in the USA, there's not a lot of new ranches that are starting. I mean, like, it's hard to buy land, any large amounts of land. And so like these, starting up a large scale 10,000 head commercial ranching operation from scratch in 2023 is probably not going to happen for most people, but there are a lot of people that can buy smaller places outside of a major metropolitan area, and run smaller amounts of cows, 50 to 100 head, and really make an enjoyable lifestyle doing that. With Brahman cattle. And so when people are choosing their new breed or a breed that they want to get into, I think Brahman rises to the top really high because they are, like you said, so unique. They're very impressive to have in your pasture. And I think, I know in lots of international countries, raising Brahman cattle is a status symbol. The government dignitaries raise Brahman cattle, the celebrities of that country raise Brahman cattle. And so it's a great breed to brag about being in, I think.
Sure. Yeah, no. And I think that's kind of what's driving it here.
Hmm. So I want to go back real quick, just kind of while we wrap up, a couple more questions. But we talked about the sales data of like Brahman heifers, Brahman bull, semen, and embryos, which all of those you sell in your sales, aspirations, all of that. Is there a certain category that you're seeing as maybe, more successful, more trendier right now? If someone was going to invest in cattle, as far as getting a return on their investment, are there certain areas that you see as more popular than others?
So it looks like, yeah, there are several areas there. Of course, high end females are pretty popular. There seems to be a real push for polled cattle right now,
Hmm.
because being polled for the most part is relatively new, and a
Hmm.
lot of the other breeds are polled, and Brahmins gravitating that way. The red cattle have kind of been a hit and miss. If there's an international market, which up until probably a year ago, Thailand was extremely popular, and they were buying a lot of red cattle and spending good money. So you saw red females do extremely well.
Hmm.
Um, Pregnant recipients are doing quite well. And the reason being is that the work's done. And for the most part, they're high end genetics when you talk about producing an embryo calf out of a top donor and maybe some exclusive semen.
Hmm.
Uh, these exclusive semen packages, and we talk about some of the really elite sires where people are offering a straw or two. They do extremely well. And of course, that's driven by IVF, where you can take one straw of semen, you can maximize that semen over 4 or 5 different donors. So people are willing to pay a little bit more for that. One area that I don't think does as well as probably people might think it will would be an aspiration, and the reason being is so complicated. You buy an aspiration on a cow today. Now you have to find a facility to take the cow to. You have to buy some semen. You have to set up precips. It's just extremely involved.
Mhm.
So I think that if somebody's getting into business or they're getting ready to market something, I think you have to think about, okay, if I was buying something, what would I want to buy? And I think it's something that's going to propel your program. Exclusive genetics come to mind, and something where the work's already done, meaning a pregnant recip or a bred female, to where I'm going to buy that, and within a short amount of time, I'm going to see a quicker return on my investment.
Mhm. Yeah, that's super interesting because you weren't seeing like pregnant recips. That's kind of a newer trend. I mean, they've always been available, but you're seeing it more in volume now.
Yes, yeah, and they do quite well.
Mhm.
They do quite well, and people are drawn to them again because the work's done, and they just I don't really think that they understand what the whole process is to get from aspirating a cow to the end result, where we're going to cut out 3 or 4 of those steps, and you're going to buy a cow that is going to have a calf. Now, even with the sex semen or reverse sorting semen, it's going to have a heifer calf or a bull calf if that's what you.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have 3 questions because as you know, we could talk for hours, but I just have 3 more topics left. Okay, you mentioned this just came to my mind because you mentioned the semen packages. So, we've had this discussion before, but currently BRC offers semen on any bull that we have in stock at any day of the week. You can go on our website every day and buy semen on Captain, Boombox, whatever we have in stock at a given price. And now and I like that for us, but I have noticed there is a trend of people not selling semen like, at all times and then just selling a couple of straws maybe once or twice a year, something like that. What is your thoughts on that? Like, give me kind of your pros and cons of whether you like the way we do it, whether you think, like, if you were giving advice to me as BRC, would you recommend that we keep our semen out there publicly or pull it off the market and just do some special offerings?
You know, I think that there's pros and cons to both of those. I'll say,
Let me jump in with this. In my cattle sales data tracking this year, there's been over 100 heifers sell this fall from BRC Genetics, which I'm really proud of. That's the highest number from any ranch, and I
Mhm,
do attribute that to our semen just being readily available at any time.
right. And I think that's one of the pros, and we, like I mentioned earlier, we made a lot of cows, and invariably a guy says, okay, here's the 5 donors that I want to aspirate this year. Okay, fine. And you go to mate them up and you find out, well, I want to use this bull. And you call the guy and you're like, hey, I know you've done your specials or whatever it is. And, I want to buy semen on this bull. No, we're going to sell that again in Houston or in, 6 months in our sale or whatever the case might be. Like,
Mhm,
okay, so we can't use your bull? No. Oh, okay. So then, of course, we move on and we do something else. It's lost revenue to whoever the seller is, but
mhm,
it's an inconvenience, and really, from a customer service standpoint, doesn't look real good.
mhm,
But I'll also get to that if you want to sell them periodically in these special occasions, that you spotlight that and you bring awareness to it that says, okay, if you're going to buy it, you got to do it today. This is the only opportunity you're going to have. And it seems like that sense of urgency really pushes people over to
mhm.
say, okay, we got to buy it today. If we don't, we're not going to have that
Yeah.
opportunity. So
Well,
I think there's pros and cons to both
you
sides.
remember, I know Noble is a good example. We do not sell semen on Noble because I don't have any more. I mean, anything that I'm selling now is from my personal reserve. And so when we did donate that straw of Noble at the national sale,
Mhm.
what did it bring? You remember? Roughly
I think it's what, 17,000?
17, 18,000. Yeah. I mean, so that's great. And like you said, it was just that sense of urgency that like, hey, there's not a lot of this floating around, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Second to last question is if we have a listener who wants to enlist the services of Infinity Cattle Services to help them, what's the process? What does that look like?
It's pretty simple. One, before they call, they need to identify what their needs are. Typically we get calls and to be quite honest with you, I mean, we'll have people calling and like, hey, we've got, a herd of cows that we want to sell. And a lot of times it just doesn't work for us. It's not what we do. Identify what your needs are. But, like we talked about earlier, whenever we started this, we're a full service consulting and marketing firm. So, we can do anything from helping you do your registrations to record keeping, of course, mating your cows or helping you on what bulls to select. Of course, marketing, a big part of what we do is we have different online sales throughout the course of the year, both that I host as well as for other people. If somebody's out there and they're interested, give me a call. Let's talk about what your needs are and how we might be able to work together. And one thing that I'll tell you, if I don't think I can help you, I'm going to tell you up front that I just don't think that we're going to be a good fit for each other. Because there's no need in you spending the money and ultimately me knowing that this isn't going to be a good fit and it not working out for either one of us. So we'll be very forthright and upfront with you. And but then, there's a lot of things we can do to help a lot of people.
Well, I mean, and you can. That's the thing. You work with anyone from a person who's buying their first Brahmin animal to breeders like us who are well established and pretty experienced. But there are definitely times for us where there are questions or things that come up that we need like your professional expertise. And so like you can work with people at whatever level they need. And that's a great thing about being a customer of Infinity is that everything is custom tailored to each person and it always results in success. We love your business.
Well,
So,
I appreciate that. And we always are honored to have the opportunity to be able to work with VRC as well.
so last question is, what is your favorite Brahmin animal of all time? Who is your favorite Brahmin animal of all time?
I really wish you wouldn't ask me that. so,
Okay,
you
you
know,
can just decline if you don't want to.
we work for a lot of people and represent a lot of different bloodlines and cattle. Um, I don't know. You live with a guy who probably has the same concept and idea that I do. And I think that, and I don't really know which one it would be because I think it would be an animal that would combine a lot of things. We've talked a lot about, both combining phenotype and performance. And there's several animals that kind of come to mind there. There's no doubt that, Liberty's been a bull. It's been very, very influential. When you look at, both on the performance and the maternal side, as well as, maybe a bull that sires as many show winners as any sire to come along. Carew. I mean, I think a lot of people would have mixed emotions about Carew. But I think when you talk about a bull that really combines both the phenotype and the performance, he'd be a bull that would, I think, be at the forefront.
Well, I mean, many of our best females are Karoo female lines. I mean, so I agree with that. Yes, they're a little high headed, but I mean, I would definitely agree with that and Liberty as well. But I mean, many of our best females go back to Karoo.
Right, right. Red
Is there more?
listeners, what's that?
Is there more? We can keep going.
I mean, and of course the red guys, I'm sure like, okay, what's your favorite red bull? I mean, there's no doubt that Smoking Guns made a huge impact in this breed. I mean, in terms of show winners, international appeal and marketability. I would say, and I know that y'all are going to visit or maybe already have with Stuart Watkins, I think you have to like the Maximus bull.
Oh,
Out of all the cattle that we sell on the red side, man, if they're Smoking Gun or they're Maximus, we can make them ring the bell. So,
have any experience with Smoking Gun, but I can definitely say, I mean, Maximus is a dream bull. I mean, he's like the picture in my head, at least when I'm looking at a modern red Brahmin. That's the picture that comes to my head.
sure,
Is
sure.
there, I'll rephrase it and say, if you don't have a favorite, is there an animal, a Brahmin animal of the past that you wish that you could go back and see in person? Like you could say, oh yeah, I saw that bull, when he was just a 2-year-old bull, or I saw that cow, any favorites from history that you wish you would have been able to see in person?
Rachel, I don't know. One cow that you were involved with that's, I mean, made a huge impact on the breed would be the 617 cow.
Yeah.
Um, a cow that probably, I don't know. I wouldn't, I mean, I never saw the cow, and you may have, but the Cladesta cow, that's one that kind of comes to mind as maybe being
Well, see,
one
I
that,
think there's a fine line there because I definitely remember both of those cows visually. I was little, but I mean, I remember them. And even when I look back at pictures of 617, which that was in the early 80s, she wasn't that she's not that impressive of a cow visually and would be very light muscled, compared to what we have now. And I do think that's a struggle that we have when we look back, like with nostalgia, with our rose colored glasses. We're like, oh, if I could just breed Rex A. Manso today, like what would that look like? And I mean, yes, I would love to have seen Rex A. Manso in person. I think he's just the most visually perfect bull from pictures I've seen, but that's the thing. When you look at pictures versus what they are now, I think we've definitely improved and came a long way, since that time. It's hard to say because I think our cattle, there are better cattle now, but there were also some better cattle back then too. It's constantly changing.
oh, as it should, if
I've
our
used
cattle
that.
weren't any better today than they would have been 30, 40 years ago, then we're doing something bad wrong.
Oh, I know. I've used that picture of 617 before where I have a picture of her as an older cow and she looks like just a cow, but I photoshopped off her brand and used that in a presentation to say like, well, what do y'all think about this cow? And most of the time people are just like, just a cow, it's just a cow. But you think about that cow and what she produced really before like IVF or uh, mass production options, she was a powerhouse. Like she was consistently producing great offspring of that time, as natural calves. And that's amazing.
Oh, no, exactly. And just the influence that she's played in the breed.
Yeah.
When you look at what her progeny did, not, in terms of show wins, but also the money that she generated.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great. Well, Chris, we've been nearly an hour. Of course, anytime you and I talk, it's nearly an hour. But this has been so enjoyable and I have just loved it. And really, everyone who's listening has just got a free consultation session from you. And it has been great. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us on the podcast. And thank you for your time and expertise. This was wonderful.
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity and hope that everybody feels like it's beneficial.
So, just to wrap up, tell everyone if they do want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to contact you over Facebook or your website?
Sure. So we do have a website, infinitycattle.com. We do have a Facebook page, and ask that if you've not already, that you follow that. Telephone number to give us a call would be 713-202-1747. Our email is infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. So any of those outlets, give us a call or send us a message, and we look forward to assisting you where we can.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And thanks, everyone, for listening to Over the Hump podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Hey guys, we hope that you're enjoying the Over the Hump podcast. We've had so many great reviews and great feedback from this podcast, and we've had several people asking how they can support it. So we are proud to announce that we've created the Over the Hump fan club where you can join and sign up on a yearly basis to help support this podcast and get some really cool merch as well. We have 3 different levels ranging from $40 a year to $250 a year. And at each level, you get some really cool different benefits and different free gifts. For example, at our Trailblazer level, you get a free copy of my really awesome Modern Brahmin coffee table book, which is a 160-page coffee table book featuring the gorgeous photography of Carlos Guizor from Mexico, along with Brahmin history written by me. And then our Supreme Stockman level, which is $250 a year, includes that plus free access to the Brahmin Academy for 1 year. And at our Trailblazer and Supreme Stockman levels, you also get a discount to use in the BRC online store, which you can use for anything that's in the store, including semen, AI certificates, show cattle camp, event registrations, and more. So this is a really great opportunity, especially if you purchase a lot of semen or AI certificates from us. You can join the fan club and get some great discounts to use throughout the whole year. So if you like this podcast and want to help support it, you can sign up for the Over the Hump fan club at shopbrcutrer.com. That's shopbrcutrer.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you are enjoying it.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Cutrer. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.